Greetings, Gusters. We're going to make some bread. Now, this is going to be my second attempt at using this Pullman pan. I want to make a sandwich loaf. I want it to be like a typical square-ended or rectangular-ended loaf that you can cut up to make sandwiches with. But this one's going to be a sourdough one. Okay, so it's going to follow a lot of the traditional sourdough steps or stages, if you like. But we're going to cook it in that tin. We're not going for the classic crust and split. Okay, it's going to be a sandwich loaf. So this is going to be, over 2 days, a sourdough sandwich bread. We'll start with plain bread flour. Okay, now the recipe was for a smaller tin than this, so I've had to adjust it for a total dough weight of 900 grams. The original one I think was 780, and that wouldn't have filled up my tin. So I've upped the quantities. So the ones we're going to use for that tin, which is a Pullman 9x4x4 inch, that is, I've got 404 grams, oops, apart from what I threw over there, of bread flour. Then I'm adding some sugar. I've got 14 grams of sugar. Keep your seats leaking, losing water out of there. And then I've got some salt. Some of that just needs breaking up a little bit. I've got 7 grams of salt. I've got to be careful I'm following my one and not the other one. I've got some milk, some whole milk. I've got 185 grams of that. In that goes. So I've still got some water and some butter to add. Okay, but we're not adding that at that stage. What we now need to do is add our sourdough starter. So I fed this morning, and it's nice and active at the moment. What I want of that is 115 grams of this. So I'm going to have to refeed what's left. There's not going to be an awful lot left. Now this is actually my rye starter. Okay. He says getting it everywhere. This is my rye starter that I've had on the go for ages. Just me, I had to move everything around to get my stand thing out. So that shouldn't do any harm, but that's what we're using. In that's going to go, and we're now going to start combining that together with the dough hook for one sort of slow to medium before we start adding the final 2 ingredients. So I've started a gentle mix on that just to start trying to bring it all together, and then in a second or two we're going to gradually add in that water, and it's only once everything's all combined we'll then start adding in that butter. Now the water, I've got 115 grams, and we've got some softened unsalted butter, although they don't have to be unsalted. I've got 63 grams, no sorry, 63 grams of that. It's assuming that the starter, by the way, is about 80 to 100% hydrated. If you were using 100, actually I'm going to stop your logger, because I think otherwise that's going to go everywhere when I tip that in there. If you're using 100% hydrated starter, then take about a tablespoon of water out. Okay, so just add a little bit of that water. So I'm going to continue like that so that water's all in and it's mixed. So I'm now just going to start adding in a little bit of that butter at a time. until it's all in there. Actually, it's been very soft. It's very warm in the kitchen. Right, it looks like that butter is now finally all incorporated. So all we're going to do now is we're just going to cover that over, and we're going to leave that for 20 minutes just to rest before we do some final little bit of mixing, and we're going to do some kneading, at which point it's going to go off for its sort of 3.5 hour to 3.5 to 4 hour little rest. Right, that's had 25 minutes or so, and so now we're just going to put it back onto low, and we're just going to let it just mix again for about another 2 minutes, at which point oh, I should say, while we're doing this, if it needs scraping down off the surface, do that. And ultimately we want it all to be drawn away from the surface, and so what you apparently can do is just sprinkle some flour around the edges, just to help stop it sticking, if you like. But ultimately we want it into a ball. We're going to tip out onto a lightly floured surface, and then we're going to do some kneading. We essentially want to do some stretches and folds. So it is quite a sticky dough at this stage, so you might need a little bit of help, a bit of flour and a little bit of scraping to get it all up. And we're just going to do that until what we've got is a nice smooth ball of dough, which I'm then going to pop. Once I get it sticking again there, still a bit sticky, so it's going to need a little bit more stretching of that. But like I say, it's going to go in that bowl, and we're then just going to put it somewhere around about 24ish. So I don't need to use my proofing basket today, it's too bloody hot. But we're then going to let it sit there. We need a bit more flour, I think, and it's going to proof for about 3.5 to 4 hours, when it should obviously increase in size. Right, here we go for the last stage of today, and luckily we've now gone beer o'clock. Well, just trying out a variety of some cans of stout that I was given. Well, I didn't give them a pay for them, but they turned up yesterday. Oh, and there's new malt whiskey to try later. But anyway, that aside, I don't know how well you can see, but that is definitely started puffing up. It was very slow going. First 2.5 hours, I thought, not going to do anything, but it's puffed up. So, our final thing for tonight is we're going to take it out of that bowl. Where's my flour gone? Excuse me, must be the beer talking. We just want to knock the air out and then reshape it into a ball, put it back in here, cover it over, and it's going in the fridge. So it has started to deflate, still a little bit sticky. So all I'm going to do now is just turn them sides in, and then we're just going to flip it over, and we just want to reshape that. More flour. Oh, might have to fill that up. And like I say, that is going back in that bowl now, with the idea being it's going to go in the it's going to go in the fridge at a lower temperature, obviously, and that will give it a slower fermentation. We're going to do it for about just over 12 hours, and that should help them sourdough flavours develop. And then we bring it out and we leave it out of the fridge for about an hour before we get to the final shaping and proofing stage. So that's it for tonight. Okay, so here we are, about 14 and a half hours since I put the dough in the fridge. Now, if you remember, just before I put it in there, it finally starting to expand, and it just continued to do so in the fridge, which does make me think, actually, a lot of the flora that make up my sourdough starter are probably more suited to the cold, because it spends most of its time in the fridge, because it's just kept on going and going. I think it's the most successful sourdough sort of rise that I've had. Anyway, we're now going to start preparing it. It hasn't finished proving yet, but we're going to shape it and put it in the tin. So, like I said, this is the Pullman tin. Now, at this stage, we're not worried about the lid. We put the lid on when it goes in the oven, and that's possibly 4 hours away yet. But what I've done with the actual tin is I've given it a good greasing with butter or whatever. And we now want to roll this dough out. And I'm very limited with room, especially now I've got that air fryer there. I might just push that back a bit and remember to pull it out when I use it. But anyway, that's an aside. What we want to do is turn this out, and we want to roll it into a sheet that's going to be about 1/2 centimetre thick, if possible. I'm not sure I've got to have the room for this, but we want to keep it so that it's no wider than the length of my tin, because we're going to then be rolling it up to put a fit into that tin. So I'm just going to get this tipped out. So I've started it with a lot narrower than the tin, because as I roll it, it's obviously going to spread widthwise. Like I say, we want it so that when we roll it, it will fit in the width of that tin, and we want it to be a nice snug fit. So, like I say, we want to get it thin, because we're going to roll it up like a Swiss roll in a second. What we're going to do is we're going to start by rolling it, and as we go along, we want to make sure that we're pressing it down and making sure there are no like gaps or air pockets in it. So there's it's rolled up, and we've essentially got it seam side down, and we're going to plonk it down into that pan seam side down, and then I'm just gently making sure it's fitting all the way across into all them corners. Okay, now that's now going to go and sit somewhere warm for anything up to 4 hours. Okay, we want it to start rising, and hopefully it'll carry on rising like it has been. We want it to start rising, and we essentially want to stop and bake it when it's just coming up to the top. Remember, we need to get that lid on, and we need to make sure we butter that lid before, or grease the lid before we put the lid back on. We also need to be keeping an eye on it, because we'll need to know when to put the oven on, because it needs to be preheated. We want to get it up to 190. Now this will just go on a standard shelf, it's not going on like a baking stone or anything like that. Okay, and we haven't got to worry about steam. So, see you in about 4 hours. Better clean this mess up. That's had 3 hours in a pretty warm place, and it's almost at the top. So at this point we can remove that film, and I've greased the top up, and we're now just going to slide that on, lock it in place, and now that's going in that preheated oven, 190, for about 20 minutes. So before I forget, Now after 20 minutes we'll take it out, remove the lid, and then it'll go back in, having lowered the temperature to about 175, and it'll go on for about another 25 minutes until basically it's cooked. So right, that's at 20 minutes. I've lowered the temperature. We'll turn the dial down anyway. So just going to get that temperature to drop a bit. And this is where we now remove the lid. As you can see, this time it has successfully filled up the pan. So that's now going back in there. And although I said we're going to set it for 25 minutes, I'm just going to set that for 20 so we can check on it and see how it goes. Right, yeah, 25 minutes in the end. So let's get that out. Now, if we just want to let that cool for about 2 minutes, it should shrink away from the sides. It certainly looks like it's free on the ends anyway. And then we'll tip it out onto a wire rack. Okay, you just want to give it a chance just to cool and pull away from the edges so that we don't get any stickage. Now, yep, that's slipping out all right. Just get rid of that a bit. Nice square loaf, as you can see. Crust obviously on top a bit darker. It's quite firm. Sides are softish. Okay, sounds hollow. So we're just now going to let that cool completely before we slice it. Shouldn't really cut it when it's warm. Might have to. But anyway, there you go for now. There is our baked sourdough sandwich bread made in the Pullman pan. Right, it is still warm, but not that bad. So just gonna take the end off. And there you can see there's a nice crumb to it. Now it's still warm, it's a little bit sticky, that's why you don't cut it when it's warm. But I've got to try this bit out. So I'm going to get some butter and we're going to have a little taste. Right, I'm going to try it first off without any butter. You can definitely tell that's sour, or sourdough should I say. There's that tang to it. Nice crunch and chewed. Ooh. Definitely, when you swallow, you get that nice sourdough tang. It is actually quite powerful in this case. But very nice. So let's just try it with a bit of butter on it. Really quite strong in terms of that sourness. Definitely adds a whole new level to sandwiches, I should imagine, because it's not just your normal bog standard bread, and it's just more about what the filling is. Here you're definitely getting something from the bread. So there you go. Second time I've used that Pullman pan. First time it's actually worked as it should have done. And there you have your sourdough sandwich loaf. Not sure whether that's going to make it to work. I think I might have eaten all that before I go back to work.